Today I'm telling you a story that made parents all across Britain stop and stare at their kids a little longer. A story that made schools uncomfortable, police nervous, and an entire country ask one chilling question. How well do we really know the teenagers around us? This wasn't some dark alley. This wasn't a gang thing. This wasn't a stranger hiding in the shadows. This was planned, calmly, coldly, by kids who looked normal. Kids who went to school, laughed with friends, and blended in perfectly. And the victim, a 16-year-old girl who trusted the wrong people and paid for it with her life. This is the murder of Brianna Ghey. And once you hear what really happened, you'll understand why this case still terrifies Britain. Brianna Ghey was born in 2006. She was young, bright, and full of personality. Friends described her as funny, expressive, and creative. She loved social media, loved fashion, loved makeup, and loved being herself. Brianna was also transgender, and while she faced challenges because of that, she refused to disappear. She wanted to live loudly. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to be happy. Like any teenager, she had dreams, crushes, drama, and plans for the future. She had her whole life ahead of her. On February 11, 2023, Brianna left her home in Warrington, England. It was a normal day. No warning signs. No fear. She told her mom she was meeting friends at Culcheth Linear Park, a quiet green space where families walk dogs and kids hang out. It was daytime, early afternoon. The kind of place parents don't worry about. The kind of place where nothing bad is supposed to happen. Brianna never came home. What happened in that park would later be described by police as one of the most disturbing teenage murder cases the UK had ever seen. That day, Brianna was lured to the park by two people she trusted. A 15-year-old boy and a 15-year-old girl. Both went to school. Both seemed ordinary. No criminal history. No red flags that screamed danger. But behind the scenes, these two teenagers were planning something horrifying. This wasn't a sudden fight. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a moment of rage. This was premeditated murder. Police later discovered that the two killers had been planning Brianna's death for weeks. Not days, weeks. They talked about it in messages. They joked about it. They treated it like a project, a game, a fantasy. The girl, later known as Girl X, was described in court as the mastermind. She was obsessed with violence, obsessed with serial killers, obsessed with murder. She kept a kill list on her phone. Brianna's name was on it. So were other names. The boy known as Boy Y went along with it. He didn't stop it. He didn't warn anyone. He participated fully. On the day of the murder, they met Brianna at the park like it was just another hangout. Brianna had no idea what was coming. She trusted them. She followed them along a path surrounded by trees and bushes. Then the attack started. Brianna was stabbed over and over again. The knife wounds were brutal, relentless. Police later confirmed she was stabbed 28 times. 28. This wasn't quick. This wasn't mercy. This was rage mixed with excitement. A violent explosion of everything the killers had been fantasizing about. Brianna tried to escape. Evidence showed she ran. She fought, she screamed. But the park was quiet, and no one came in time. By the time emergency services arrived, Brianna was already gone. She was 16 years old. News of her death spread fast. At first, details were limited. Police arrested two teenagers within days. The public was shocked, but no one was ready for what would come out next. As the investigation unfolded, the messages between the killers were uncovered, and that's when the story turned from tragic to absolutely chilling. The girl sent messages talking about how excited she was. She talked about wanting to see Brianna dead. She talked about stabbing. She talked about how it would feel. This wasn't bullying gone too far. This wasn't peer pressure. This was obsession. The boy admitted he had helped plan it. He admitted he brought the knife. He admitted he took part. The court heard that the killers even discussed different murder methods before deciding on stabbing. They talked about poisoning. They talked about other violent acts. It was like listening to adults discussing a crime, except these were children. That's what shook people the most. These were kids. When the trial began, the courtroom was silent. Brianna's family sat there listening to every detail, every message, every word. Her mother cried as the final moments of her daughter's life were described. Outside the courtroom, the country was watching. Because this case wasn't just about murder, it was about something darker, something uncomfortable. It was about how violence, online culture, and teenage minds collided in the worst possible way. The killers showed no real remorse at first. The girl even smiled at times. That image alone haunted people. Parents started asking what their kids were watching online, what forums they were in, who they were talking to. In December 2023, the verdict came in. Both teenagers were found guilty of murder. They were sentenced to life in prison, with minimum terms that shocked people because of their age, but many still felt it wasn't enough. The judge described the murder as sadistic and disturbing. He said Brianna had been treated as an object, not a human being. In 2024, updates continued to come out. Appeals were discussed. Sentencing details were debated. But one thing never changed: Brianna was still gone. Vigils were held across the UK. People left flowers, candles, and messages. Her name became a symbol, not just of violence against transgender people, but of how dangerous teenage cruelty can become when it goes unchecked. Brianna's mother spoke out, begging people to remember her daughter as more than a headline, more than a statistic. She was a kid who loved life, a kid who trusted friends, a kid who never got the chance to grow up. What makes this case truly terrifying is how normal it started. A message, a meetup, a walk in a park, no alarms, no danger signs, just trust. And that's why parents across Britain were shaken to their core. Because if this could happen to Brianna, it could happen to anyone. Kids don't always show who they really are. Evil doesn't always look scary. Sometimes it looks like a classmate, a friend, someone your child texts every day. This wasn't a monster hiding in the dark. This was a monster sitting in a classroom. And that's what makes the murder of Brianna Ghey one of the most frightening real crime stories in modern UK history. And the scariest part, nobody saw it coming. Teachers didn't. Parents didn't. These were not kids people whispered about in hallways. They weren't labeled as dangerous. They weren't failing school. They weren't isolated loners living in the shadows. They were regular teenagers who blended in so well that even after the arrest, people struggled to connect the faces they knew with the horror they'd created. As police dug deeper, the digital trail told a story that words alone couldn't soften. Messages showed planning that felt unreal for kids that young. Timelines, jokes, emojis, casual talk about killing someone like it was just another after-school activity. One message talked about meeting Brianna like it was no big deal. Another talked about what knife would work best. Another talked about how exciting it would feel afterward. There was no panic in those messages. No hesitation, just cold intention. Investigators later said it was one of the most disturbing message histories they had ever read involving minors. The girl wasn't just curious about violence. She was immersed in it. Serial killer documentaries, crime stories, dark fantasies. She didn't just watch, she admired, she idolized. She imagined herself inside those stories. Brianna wasn't seen as a person anymore. She was seen as a character in someone else's twisted fantasy. And the boy? He didn't pull back. He didn't warn Brianna. He didn't reach out to an adult. He didn't even try to slow things down. Instead, he showed up. He followed through. And afterward, he tried to act normal. That's what shook the police the most. After the murder, the killers didn't run screaming. They didn't break down. They went home. They messaged friends. They acted like nothing had happened. Like they'd just hung out at the park and grabbed food. Meanwhile, Brianna's family was starting the worst night of their lives. When Brianna didn't come home, panic set in fast. Calls went unanswered. Time dragged. Every minute felt heavier than the last. Then came the call that no parent should ever receive. Police officers at the door. Serious faces. Words that don't feel real even as they're being spoken. Brianna was gone. Her mother later described feeling like the world had cracked open. Like reality itself had stopped working. One moment you're waiting for your child to walk through the door. The next moment, you're being told she's been murdered by people she trusted. As the case moved toward trial, the media coverage exploded. Every outlet wanted details. Every update hit harder than the last. People weren't just angry, they were confused. How could kids plan something like this? How did no one notice? How did this happen in a quiet park? In the middle of the day, parents across the UK started changing routines. Kids were told to share locations. Meetups were questioned. Phones were checked. Trust suddenly felt fragile. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was heavy. This wasn't dramatic shouting or movie-style chaos. It was quiet, too quiet. Every message read aloud felt like another punch to the chest. The killers sat there listening as their own words were spoken back to them. Words they once typed casually. Words that now sounded horrifying. When the details of Brianna's final moments were described, people cried openly. Even seasoned court reporters said it was one of the hardest cases they'd ever covered. Not because of gore, but because of age, because of innocence lost, because of how preventable it felt. The judge made it clear, this was not a spur-of-the-moment act. This was deliberate, planned, cruel. Brianna had been targeted. When the guilty verdicts were announced, there was no celebration. No relief, just a heavy sense of finality. 2 lives locked away, 1 life erased forever.